Log Entry Primus. Is that what this is? A testament? A final confession before the long silence. The High Sacristan called it a duty, a chronicle for the archives of House Vorn, so that those who come after might comprehend the price of their station. Comprehend. A laughable notion. No words etched by this trembling hand, no vox-captured whisper, could ever convey the immensity of what has transpired. It is a thing that must be felt, a violation of the soul that is also its most profound apotheosis. My name is Kaelen Vorn. I was the third son of the ruling lord of Krillis Prime. I write that in the past tense, for the boy who bore that name is already a ghost, a fading echo in a cavern of iron and rage. I stand now, no, I am seated, shackled within the heart of my inheritance, in the sanctum of echoes. The air is a frozen, sacred thing, thick with the cloying scent of millennia-old incense, the sharp tang of ozone from slumbering power conduits, and the metallic perfume of sanctified unguents. Before me, beyond the reinforced plasteel of the cockpit's view slit, the sanctum stretches out, a cathedral built not for the worship of a distant god corpse on Terra, but for the veneration of the god machines in our midst. The stone walls, slick with condensation, rise into a vaulted darkness where the only stars are the flickering lumens of servitor cherubs, their vat-grown faces locked in expressions of beatific idiocy. And there, dormant, silent, magnificent, is my new body, my tomb, my weapon. The Imperial Knight, Grave Vigil. Even powered down, it possesses a gravity that warps the space around it. 200 years it has stood silent, awaiting a pilot with the correct synaptic patterning, a spirit resonant with its own. 2 centuries of stillness, gathering dust and prayer. Its ceramite plate, I can see the great gouging wound on its left pauldron, where a Tau railgun slug nearly sheared the arm from its socket during the Damocles Gulf Crusade. I see the pockmarks of orc shoot-a-fire peppering its greaves, souvenirs from a brutal greenskin Wa that broke against the fortress walls of our capital. Each scar is a memory, each heraldic symbol, the iron gauntlet of Vorn, the cog mechanicus, the imperial aquila, a declaration of fealty. It is more than a machine. It is a reliquary of violence, an ancestral tomb on 2 legs. The ritual of becoming began at dawn. I, who had trained my entire life for this moment, felt a tremor in my soul that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with a primal, animal fear. Stripped of my noble finery, clad only in a simple black body glove, I was led by the tech priests of our household. They were less men than conduits for the machine god's will, their faces hidden behind polished brass, their voices a discordant symphony of binaric cant and static-laced lingua technis. They did not walk, they glided, their augmented limbs whispering across the flagstones. They anointed my skin with cold, viscous oils that smelled of metal and death, chanting litanies of activation and hymns of loyalty. Their mechadendrites, tipped with humming needles and gleaming probes, danced around me, a prelude to the violation to come. They led me up the gantry, to the hatch set into the knight's torso. The cockpit was not a command center. It was a torture rack, built in the name of glory. The Throne Mechanicum awaited me. It was no seat of honor, but a brutal, skeletal frame of blackened iron and copper wiring, bristling with neural jacks and synaptic conduits. It was designed to hold a man, to break him open, and fuse what was left to the soul of the machine. The sacristans strapped me in, their movements precise and devoid of emotion. Cold restraints locked over my limbs. A heavy, spiked helmet was lowered over my head, its interior a nest of wires and electrodes that pressed against my skull. "The flesh is weak," the high sacristan intoned, his voice a synthesized rasp. "The spirit must be yoked to the strength of steel. The mind impulse unit will bridge the gap. The throne will make you one. Do not resist. Resistance is oblivion." Then came the pain. Not the clean pain of a blade, but the invasive, intimate agony of intrusion. At the base of my skull, at my temples, along my spine, the MIU ports were engaged. I felt a series of sharp, cold piercings as the data spikes slid through flesh and bone, seeking out my nervous system. A scream was stillborn in my throat, choked by a surge of biofeedback that tasted like burnt copper. My vision dissolved into a snowstorm of white static. My own memories of my father's stern approval, of sparring with my brothers in the training cages, of the scent of rain on the dust plains of my world, surged and then scattered like ash in a hurricane. I was being unmade. And then I felt it. A presence. It was not a thought, not a voice. It was a weight. The pressure of 1,000 lifetimes pressing down on my fragile consciousness. It was ancient, vast, and it was slumbering. My intrusion was the barest touch, a fly landing on the hide of a leviathan. For a moment, there was nothing but this crushing, silent immensity. I was an intruder in a sacred tomb, a trespasser in the mind of a god. I felt an instinctual urge to flee, to rip the spikes from my skull and run screaming from this iron tomb. But I was bound fast. Then the Leviathan stirred. The static in my mind resolved, not into sight, but into sensation. A flood, a tidal wave of pure, unfiltered experience crashed over me. The collected battle memories. I was Lord Commander Tiberius at the Battle of the Gilded Cage, feeling the phantom shudder as my Reaper chainsword bit through the corrupted hull of a Chaos Land Raider, the unholy shrieks of the damned echoing in my ears. I was Lady Cassandra, the last pilot of her line, feeling the searing heat of a Warhound Titan's plasma blast gun, boiling the world to glass around me, my own skin blistering from the catastrophic heat bleed inside the cockpit. I felt the arrogant joy of a clean kill, the grinding despair of a lost battle, the cold duty of holding a line against impossible odds, agony, triumph, hatred, despair. Decades of warfare, centuries of bloodshed, compressed into a single, unbearable moment. Each impact, each kill, each death was my own. The rage was the worst part. It was a pure elemental force, a distilled fury that had been accumulating for millennia. The hatred for the alien, the mutant, the heretic. It was a righteous fire that sought to burn the galaxy clean, and it threatened to consume my own sense of self, to turn my personality into just another layer of sediment at the bottom of this ancient ocean of wrath. I fought back. I clung to my name, Kaelen Vorn. I remembered the feel of the hilt of my dueling sword, the face of my mother, the oath I swore. My name is Kaelen Vorn. I am the pilot. I am the master here. It was like screaming into a gale. The machine spirit, the layered consciousness of the pilots before me, barely registered my defiance. It was not malicious. It was simply absolute. I was a drop of rain trying to claim mastery over the sea. But in that chaotic maelstrom, one memory fragment snagged on my consciousness, repeating with a chilling, obsessive clarity. It was different from the others. The rage here was not the righteous fury against a known foe. It was not the twisted abominations of chaos, but loyal Astartes in ceramite, the color of dried blood, their chapter badge a gauntlet clenched around a chalice, the Crimson Fists. They are supposed to be allies, reinforcements. Yet the emotion that floods me, the emotion of the pilot whose memory this is not relief. It is a volcanic, soul-shattering hatred. Betrayers, oath breakers, filth. The words are not spoken. They are a psychic shriek that echoes in the machine's soul. I see my knight, Grave Vigil, raise its thermal cannon, not at an enemy, but at the banner of the Crimson Fists. The pilot, a forgotten ancestor of mine, is screaming inside the throne, his heart a supernova of fury and grief. The Astartes are turning, their bolters raising, their expressions hidden by their helms, but their surprise evident in their stance. Why? What have they done? The memory is incomplete, fractured. It ends with the blinding white flare of the cannon discharging and the all-consuming certainty of utter, unforgivable treachery. The vision shattered, leaving me gasping in the dark confines of my own mind. The torrent of other memories receded, the hurricane lessening to a storm. The presence of the night was still there, but it was no longer trying to drown me. It was observing me, testing me. It had shown me its deepest wound, its most irrational and potent rage, the ancestors' grudge. And I had survived. Slowly, tentatively, a new sensation bloomed. The link was stabilizing. I could feel the coldness of the adamantium hull, not as a man in a machine, but as if it were my own skin. I could feel the latent power thrumming in the plasma reactor, like a second heart beating in my chest. I flexed my fingers, and 50 meters away, encased in tons of steel, a massive gauntlet mirroring the motion, its digits scraping against the sanctum floor with a sound like a mountain grinding to dust. The feedback was perfect, instantaneous. The machine was mine. Or rather, the High Sacristan's voice crackled through a vox emitter in the throne. The fusion is stable. The rite is complete. Speak your name, pilot. I opened my mouth, but the voice that came out was not my own. It was deeper, resonant with the hum of a 1,000-ton reactor, layered with the echoes of every pilot who had come before. We are Grave Vigil. The silence that followed our pronouncement was heavy, absolute. The tech priests below, small as insects from my new vantage point, made gestures of supplication and reverence. They were not looking at Kaelen Vorn, third son of the house. They were gazing upon their God made manifest, their litanies of maintenance and activation fulfilled. This machine, and the ghost now haunting it, was the culmination of their life's work. The sense of dislocation was profound. I was here, a prisoner in a cage of my own ribs, and I was also out there, a towering colossus of war, whose slightest twitch could crush these men to paste. The duality was a razor's edge, and I felt my sanity balancing upon it. Power, raw and intoxicating, was a drug seeping through the MIU ports, dulling the pain of the connection. I felt the immense potential energy stored within the plasma reactor, a caged star waiting for my command to be unleashed. I felt the thousands of rounds of ammunition nestled in their feeds, each one a tiny promise of death. I could sense the structural integrity of the sanctum's vaulted ceiling, calculate the precise force needed to bring it crashing down. This was not knowledge I had learned, it was knowledge I was. It had been subsumed into my being along with the memories of my ancestors. My first true command was a simple one: walk. In my human body, it was an unconscious act. Here, it was a symphony of colossal forces. I focused my will not on my legs, but on the concept of forward motion. The response was immediate. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the chassis as the primary motivators engaged. Hydraulic fluid, thick as blood, surged through armored pistons the size of ancient trees. With a groan of stressed metal that echoed like the lament of a dying world, Grave Vigil lifted a leg. The foot, a slab of adamantium large enough to crush a Lehman Russ tank, rose clear of the sanctified floor and then descended. The impact was not a footstep, it was a percussive event, a miniature earthquake of my own making. The entire sanctum trembled. Dust, disturbed from rafters where it had rested for centuries, rained down in a fine gray sheet. I took another step, then another. The rhythm was slow, ponderous, yet possessed of an unstoppable momentum. Each footfall was a drumbeat in the funeral dirge of our enemies. I guided us out of the sanctum, through blast doors that parted like the gates of a mythical underworld, and into the pale gray light of Krillus Prime. The world was small. The training grounds, which had once seemed a vast expanse from the viewing platforms, were now a patch of scuffed dirt I could cross in a dozen strides. The fortress monastery of my family home, a structure that had dominated the landscape of my youth, was now a collection of towers I could peer down upon. My brothers, Garrod and Lyron, stood beside our father on the primary bastion. Through the night's advanced optics, I could see them with impossible clarity, their faces upturned, their expressions a mixture of awe and something else, a new distance. They were not looking at their brother, they were looking at an icon, an asset of war. In that moment, the first true fissure of my isolation cracked open. I was no longer one of them. I was a thing apart, a demigod of steel and fire, and the gulf between us was as vast as the void between stars. The days that followed were a blur of calibration, weapons testing, and a slow grinding dissolution of self. Disconnecting from the Throne Mechanicum was a physical and spiritual agony. It felt like an amputation. The sudden return to the frailties of my flesh was a shock every time. The world, once felt through 1,000 different sensors, collapsed back into the pathetic limitations of 5. The air felt thin in my lungs. My own limbs felt weak, clumsy. My heart beat a frantic, panicked rhythm in my chest, a frightened bird in a cage of bone. So unlike the steady, powerful thrum of the plasma reactor. I would stumble from the cockpit, drenched in a cold sweat that smelled of ozone and fear, my MIU ports leaking a thin, pinkish fluid. The sacristans would tend to me with their cold, metallic claws, their concern not for the man, but for the organic component's stability. I was a part of the machine that could fail. My family tried to breach the new chasm between us. During the evening meal, my father would speak of strategy, of the Knight's capabilities, of the Orc incursions on the system's edge that would soon require our attention. He spoke to Grave Vigil, not to Kaelen. Lyran, always the jester, tried to joke about my new height. But the words died on his lips when he saw the deadness in my eyes. Garrett, the eldest, the heir, simply watched me with a calculating expression, weighing the power I now represented. I ate, but the food tasted like ash. I slept, but my dreams were not my own. They were a chaotic montage of burning cities, seen from a great height. The satisfying crunch of ceramite under my heel, and the constant, whispering echo of that one terrible memory. The field of gray ash, the blood-red Astartes, and the soul-searing shriek of betrayers. This ancestor's grudge was more than a memory. It was a psychosis embedded in the very soul of the machine. It began to bleed into my waking world. Sometimes, while reviewing tactical data on a slate, the text would momentarily shimmer, and I would see the Crimson Fist's chapter badge. The sigil of the gauntlet and chalice would trigger a phantom sensation, a jolt of pure atavistic hatred that made my teeth grind and my hand clench into a fist. My own heart would pound with an alien fury. I found myself seeking answers in the house archives, a dusty, silent library, curated by a logmaster so ancient he seemed more a part of the vellum scrolls than a living man. When I requested the battle logs pertaining to Grave Vigil's service during the Age of Apostasy, the era I intuited the memory was from, his reply was a dry rustle of parchment-like skin. Those records are sealed by the order of Lord Commander Tiberius himself, my lord, he rasped, not meeting my gaze. Tiberius. I knew that name. I had been him for a fleeting, violent moment in the throne. He was the pilot who had fought at the Gilded Cage. The data slate is recorded as corrupted by grief, unfit for counsel. Corrupted by grief. A sanitized lie to mask an unforgivable truth. The refusal only deepened my obsession. The grudge was a splinter in my new shared mind, and it was beginning to fester. The machine spirit felt it too. During drills, its response would become sluggish, its targeting reticles flickering until the tech priests performed calming litanies of appeasement. It was brooding. It was nursing a wound that 1,000 years had not healed, and I was now shackled to its undying rage. The call to war came, as it always does, with the shriek of a planetary alarm klaxon. A flotilla of orc rocks had been sighted on a trajectory for the primary Agra sector. This was it. Not a drill, not a simulation. The real thing. The walk to the sanctum was different this time. There was no ceremony, only a grim, urgent purpose. The fear was still there. The connection to the throne was as brutal as ever, the data spikes a violation that I was becoming grimly accustomed to. But as my consciousness merged with the machine, the rage was closer to the surface this time. The ocean of memories roiling with imminent battle fury. When I spoke, the unified voice of "We are Grave Vigil" boomed through the sanctum's voxcasters with an edge of savage hunger. We strode from the fortress, our tread shaking the very foundations of my ancestral home. Two other knights from our house, Ironheart and Adamant Fury, fell into formation beside us. We were a trinity of god machines, an avatar of mankind's fury sent to purge the alien. The Agra sector was already burning. The sky was choked with greasy black smoke from crude orc engines and incinerated hydroponic domes. The greenskins were a tide of rusted metal, roaring muscle, and mindless violence. Deaf dreads lumbered forward, their claws snapping, while hordes of boys surged across the fields, their crude shooters spitting a storm of lead. The tactical display in my vision was a sea of hostile markers, but the machine spirit needed no cogitator to identify the foe. It recognized the shape of the enemy, the scent of their foul existence, and it responded with a surge of pure, glorious hatred that I found myself swept up in. Weapons free, I subvocalized, and the command was instinct. The Avenger Gatling cannon on my right arm erupted. The sound was not a series of gunshots. It was a single, continuous, deafening roar, like the tearing of reality itself. A stream of fist-sized explosive shells tore into the orc lines. Greenskin bodies vanished in puffs of red mist and shredded metal. The physical feedback was immense, a brutal, satisfying shudder that ran through the entire chassis. I felt the heat of the spinning barrels as if it were my own skin flushing with exertion. It was exhilarating. It was horrific. I targeted a kilocan with the thermal cannon. The weapon hummed for a fraction of a second, drawing a colossal amount of energy from the reactor, and then unleashed a beam of incandescent light. The Orc Walker didn't explode. It simply ceased to be, its armor and pilot sublimating into a cloud of superheated vapor. A wave of triumphant wrath washed through me, a gift from the machine spirit. It felt good. By the throne, it felt divine. I was a god of retribution, and this was my judgment. We waded into them. The Reaper chainsword, a weapon as long as a hablock is tall, whirred to life. Its adamantium teeth, each the size of a grown man, chewed through the hull of a death dread, showering my view slit with sparks and foul-smelling fluids. My feet crushed their war trucks underfoot, the sound of their buckling frames, a pleasing counterpoint to the roar of my guns. Kaelen Vorn, the boy who had been sickened by his first duel, was gone. In his place was a being that reveled in the slaughter, that saw beauty in the precise application of overwhelming force. Then, in the heart of the chaos, I saw it. A large orc knob, clad in scavenged armor, had a piece of a space marine pauldron nailed to his chest plate as a trophy. It was battered, scorched, and painted over with crude orc glyphs. But beneath the filth, the color was unmistakable. It was the deep blood red of the crimson fists. The sight struck me with the force of a physical blow. The roar of the battle faded. The tactical data vanished. My vision was overlaid with the gray ash, the bruised sky, the turning Astartes. The machine spirit screamed, not with the righteous fury of battle, but with the focused, poisonous venom of the grudge. Betrayers! The shriek was not a memory. It was here. It was now. It was my rage. I lost control. All tactical sense, all awareness of the wider battle evaporated. There was only the symbol. It was a lurch of pure, autonomous fury. The other night pilots were shouting my name over the Vox, their voices distant and tinny. I didn't hear them. I, raised the thermal cannon, not at the knob, but at the trophy on his chest. It was an act of supreme, irrational overkill. The world bleached white as I fired, incinerating the knob in a huge swath of his boys. The act did not sate the rage. It only honed it to a finer point. I was no longer a pilot. I was a passenger, carried along by a millennia-old hatred that had finally found a target, however pathetic and vicarious. The battle ended. The orcs were broken, annihilated. We stood victorious amidst a field of fire and alien dead. The other pilots hailed our ferocity, our kill count. My father's voice, when it came over the command channel, was filled with a grim pride. But as the battle lust faded, the horror returned, colder and sharper than ever. I had not been a warrior. I had been a weapon, wielded by a ghost. And I had seen, in that moment of absolute fury, that the ghost's hatred was now my own. The transformation was complete. I stood on the scorched earth of my home world, a hero to my house, but I had never felt more isolated, more utterly and terrifyingly alone. I was a monster in a steel cage, and the true enemy was locked inside with me. The weeks following that first battle were a cold, waking dream. I performed my duties, accepted the accolades from my father, and stood silent as the tech priests replaced the scorched and bloodied armor plates of my new body. But I was a ghost at the feast. Within the throne, the ancestors' grudge was no longer a dormant splinter, but a living, breathing entity. It coiled in the depths of our shared consciousness, a serpent of pure hatred, sated for a time by the vicarious slaughter of the orcs, but now restless, whispering its poison into the quiet moments. The rage had found a voice, and it was my own. In the silent hours, I would find myself tracing the sigil of the gauntlet and chalice onto fogged-up plasteel, my fingers moving of their own accord. my heart thumping with a venomous rhythm that was not mine. I was its vessel, and I feared that the next time it awoke, I would not have the strength to cage it again. The true test came not from the Xenos filth, but from the gilded tongue of an astropath. A message, pierced through the warp's howling madness, arrived for my father. The Orc threat in the sector was larger than our household augurs had predicted. Imperial reinforcements were being diverted to Krillis Prime to aid in the final purgation, and to use our world as a staging ground for a wider crusade. My father read the dispatch with a stern pride, seeing it as an affirmation of our house's importance. He announced the news at the evening meal, his voice booming with satisfaction. "A full strike force from the Adeptus Astartes," he declared, raising his goblet. "They will see how the Knights of House Vorn make war. We are to welcome them with full honors. They are the Crimson Fists." The name struck the hall into a reverent silence. For everyone else, it was a name of legend, the saviors of Rin's world, paragons of imperial virtue. For me, it was a death knell. A jolt, violent and electric, shot through my spine. The wine in my goblet turned to ash in my mouth. Deep within the core of my mind, where Kaelen and Grave Vigil were intertwined, the serpent of the grudge uncoiled with a psychic scream that was thankfully audible only to me. "Betrayers! Oathbreakers! They dare return?" The rage was so potent, so absolute, that I felt a nosebleed begin, a thin trickle of hot blood down my lip that I wiped away with a trembling hand. No one else noticed. They were too busy celebrating. I was alone, shackled to a bomb that was about to detonate. I was ordered to lead the honor guard,
to stand with iron heart and adamant fury on the great Plascrete landing fields as the Astartes Thunderhawks descended. Every step from the sanctum was an act of war against myself. The machine spirit fought me, its immense will attempting to override my commands. It wanted to turn back, to arm its weapons, to level the fortress rather than welcome these things. The MIU ports at my temples and spine burned with a cold fire as I forced my will upon the chassis. The hydraulic limbs felt stiff, resistant. The very air in the cockpit seemed thick with a menacing hum. The reactor's steady beat quickening to a war drum's frantic pace. "They are allies of the Imperium," I projected into our shared mind space, a desperate plea. "We are bound by oath to welcome them." "They broke their oath first," the grudge shrieked back, the thought laced with the memory of fire and ash. "Their honor is a lie. Their souls are hollow." We reached the landing field. The sky tore open with the brutal roar of descent engines, and 3 Thunderhawk gunships, their hulls painted the color of dried blood, broke through the gray clouds. On their wings, stark and proud, was the clenched fist and chalice. The sight was a physical blow. The machine spirit bucked against my control like a mortally wounded beast. My vision flickered, the tactical display dissolving into the gray, ashen landscape of the memory. I could feel my own hands, my real flesh and blood hands, clenching the throne's control bars so tightly that my knuckles were white. The targeting reticle of the thermal cannon flared to life, an angry red rune that overlaid itself directly onto the lead gunship. And then the memory did not just flash, it consumed me. The machine spirit, driven to the brink by the physical presence of its most hated foe, opened its heart to me completely. It showed me the source of the grudge. I was Lord Captain Valerius Vorn. Centuries ago, a great chaos uprising had been crushed, and my knight, Grave Vigil, had fought alongside the Crimson Fists. We had saved their flank from a wave of demonic engines. We had bled together. Their commander, a Captain Boros, had sworn an oath of brotherhood with me over the smoking hull of a defiler. Now, I stood on a ridge overlooking my household's encampment. But there was no celebration. Below, the Crimson Fists were moving through the camp, their bolters leveled. Their chaplain, a fearsome figure with a skull helm, was reading from a scroll. My men, the sacristans, the guardsmen, the support staff who had maintained Grave Vigil through the fires of hell, were being forced to their knees. By the authority of the Ordo Malleus, the chaplain's amplified voice echoed, cold and devoid of mercy. This auxiliary force is declared compromised. You have stood witness to an incursion majoris. Your minds have been exposed to mimetic contagion. Your souls are forfeit. The sentence is death. I screamed his name over the vox. Boros! What is this madness? These are loyal men. They fought and died for you. His reply came back, laced with static and something that might have been regret, but it was buried under a mountain of cold dogma. The Inquisitor's seal is absolute, Valerius. The taint of the warp must be purged, lest it spread. There can be no exceptions. It is a regrettable necessity. Necessity? The word was a joke. This was not justice. It was not even pragmatism. It was the brutal, unthinking cruelty of a bureaucracy that valued purity over loyalty, dogma over honor. They were not killing a potential threat. They were murdering witnesses to save on paperwork. They were breaking their oath of brotherhood for the sake of cold, imperial calculus. I watched as the first volley of bolter fire tore into my people. My people. The ones who had armed me, prayed for me, whose lives were sworn to my house. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it cracked my soul. The grief was a physical force, but beneath it, the rage was a star going supernova. I raised my thermal cannon. I did not target the chaplain, or Boros, or even the firing squad. I targeted their company banner, the symbol of their hollow honor, fluttering proudly in the wind. The grudge screamed its first scream, and I fired. The memory ended in a flash of white-hot light and the taste of my own soul burning to cinders. I was back. Kaelen Vorn, in the cockpit, on Krillis Prime. The lead Thunderhawk's assault ramp was lowering. A captain of the Crimson Fists, his artificer armor gleaming, stood, silhouetted against the light. And my thermal cannon was at full charge, its high-pitched whines screaming in my ears. The targeting rune was locked onto the Astartes captain's chest. The machine spirit was roaring, demanding vengeance, pulling the trigger with all the weight of its history. My body was rigid, every muscle straining. I was losing. The rage was too old, too strong. The trigger impulse was building. In a fraction of a second, I would fire. I would murder an Imperial hero and plunge my house into a war it could not win. And in that moment of finality, I stopped fighting it. I surrendered, not to the rage, but to the memory. I let the grief of Valerius wash over me. I embraced the betrayal. I focused all my will and spoke into the heart of the machine, not as a master, but as an equal. "I know," I said, my thought a whisper in the hurricane. "I saw. I remember what they did to our people. The debt will never be paid." The roaring faltered for an instant. The machine was listening. "But we are not Valerius," I continued, my mind racing. "His vengeance was a scream of despair. Ours will be a vow of silence. We will not give them the mercy of a quick death. We will serve alongside them. We will be their living conscience, their unforgiven trespass. Our vigilance is our vengeance." It was a gamble born of absolute desperation, to turn the grudge from a weapon of blind fury into one of cold, eternal contempt. For a long, agonizing second, the pressure on the trigger held steady. The whine of the cannon reached its peak. The crimson fists below had now seen us, their hands moving towards their sidearms. Then, with a groan of protesting metal so loud it was audible from the ground, the thermal cannon lowered. The targeting rune vanished. The charge whined down into silence. The machine had agreed. The serpent had not been slain, but it had been charmed. We had made a pact, the ghost and I. I keyed the external vox, and the voice that boomed across the plascrete was not the boy Kaelen, nor the furious Valerius, but something new, a synthesis of man and machine, ancient and young, cold as the void, and burning with a controlled, black fire. "Captain," our voice resonated, "welcome to Krillus Prime. House Vorn stands ready." The Astartes captain, to his credit, barely flinched, though I could see the tension in the set of his shoulders. He could not know the war that had just been fought, and won, inside my iron shell. He only saw a god machine lower its weapon and offer a formal greeting. And now, I write this. The crimson fists are in my fortress. I see their blood-red armor in the halls, and the grudge stirs. A low growl in the back of my mind. But it is my growl now. I am no longer fighting for my soul. I have accepted its loss. Kaelen Vorn is a component, a conscious will bound to a reliquary of hatred. We are its warden. We will fight for the Imperium. We will slay the alien and the heretic. And we will stand beside the crimson fists on 100 battlefields. A constant, silent. Not to be a hero, not to be a noble, but to be a living tomb, a keeper of a single, perfect, unforgivable memory. I am Grave Vigil, and our watch has just begun.